Get started? Okay. Thank you everyone for joining me today at HMSC's research seminar. My name is Cinnamon Moffett and I'm the research program manager at Oregon State University's Hatfield Marine Science Center, and I will be your host for today. We do have your cameras and mics and screen shares turned off. So please ask any questions of us during the talk using the chat button that you can find either at the bottom or the top of your screen, depending on what type of device you are using. And we'll get to those questions at the end of today's talk. I wanted to also let everybody know that we are recording today's session, and I'm going to put that link on where that recording will go into the chat, one, so that you can find the chat if you haven't already, but also just to let you know that that is there and will be posted probably in 2 days, and you'll be able to see it again if you miss something or share it with others. The other thing that's nice is that I'm unable to provide closed caption today live, but it will be on the recording. So if you need that functionality, it will be there on the recording in a couple of days. Couple of quick announcements. I wanted to let everybody know that we have an HMSC Science on Tap next week. On Wednesday, March 16th at 6 p.m. We'll have Peter Ruggiero, a professor with CEOS at OSU, and the director of the new Cascadia Coastlines and People's Hazards Research Hub, that is not an easy title, will be giving a virtual talk on how do coastal communities increase their resilience to natural hazards. So we will hope that you join us for that event. The other thing that we have is next week on March 17th, we have a seminar during our normal time slot, Thursday at 3:30. Guillermo Corta is a postdoctoral research at the Universidad de São Paulo. We'll be talking about the hidden biodiversity of beach ecosystems. So we would love for you to come and join us again next week, same place and same time. If you need information about any of these events, the login information, timing, those kind of things, if you Google or use whatever platform you use, check out HMSC's homepage, scroll to the bottom, and you'll get a calendar of events there, and you can click on any of those events and get all the information you need. I also just wanted to let folks know that due to a last-minute schedule conflict, we have a brand new open date in our seminar series. So if anybody is interested, I'm looking for a speaker on April 28th. So if you or one of your colleagues would like to help us out, please contact me and we'll get you on the schedule. But for now, I'm going to hand this off to Allison Storms, the administrative assistant to the director of the Coastal Oregon Marine Experimental Station at Hatfield. Allison is involved in many equity and inclusion efforts, both at Hatfield and on main campus, and was instrumental in connecting us with today's speaker. So Allison, I'm going to hand it off to you to introduce our speaker.
Thank you, Cinnamon. So my name is Allison, as Cinnamon said, and I sit on both the College of Agricultural Sciences Climate Diversity and Inclusion Committee, and also have been working with the HMSC working group to address racial injustice. And so I heard Dr. Arismendi give part of this talk during a CAS CDI meeting and thought it would be perfect for our seminar series. So I'm very excited that he's here today. Dr. Ivan Arismendi is an aquatic ecologist who currently holds an associate professor position at Oregon State University. Growing up in southern Chile, his interest for aquatic ecology was sparked as he witnessed the invasion of trout and salmon in his native waters. He leads scientific research focused on global environmental change, invasion biology, and aquatic food webs. He is also interested in the people who use or study in natural resources, which has led to emergent research on diversity, equity, and inclusion in science. To date, Dr. Arismendi has published 88 peer-reviewed articles and book chapters and has received various awards, including the Savory Outstanding Young Faculty Award from the College of Agricultural Sciences at Oregon State University and the Emmeline Moore Prize from the American Fisheries Society, a career achievement award that recognizes efforts in the promotion of demographic diversity in AFS. I'm very pleased to present Dr. Arismendi, and I'm going to turn it over to him. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you very much for the invitation. Can you see my slide?
Yep, everything looks great. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. So the closed caption may not work for me because I have an accent and strong accent sometimes. So please forgive me if I say a word that doesn't mean that we're trying to say. Anyway, Thank you for coming today. This is week 10. I know that it's a lot of going on, especially you are teaching. So I have kind of a more like reflections of some of the work we're doing in the last few years related to collaborations and from the lens of fisheries science, which is my field. I'm borrowing ideas that many people knows, especially you see people here in the audience from social science, that is not a surprise. We're not discovering anything new. It's like we're trying to put this in the context of our sciences, especially fisheries, that we usually don't have cross-pollination with social sciences, so we're missing these pieces. So I'm trying to do my best, given I'm an ecologist. So talking about people is kind of hard unless we talk about the construction of gender and race, especially in North America, where we are focusing the science. And there is two aspects that are really obvious for many people, but probably not for generations. And the one is the relationship between race and what we have now. So just to remind people, just a few hundreds of years ago, there were foundational ideas in North America related to the slavery of Africa, which is totally fine at those times. And even 100 years ago, that thinking about the question about the humanity of people. So think about these are at least 1 or 2 generations, and those legacy of these foundational ideas still persist. And we talk a lot about biases in science and confirmation biases and stuff like that. So think about this in terms of the construction of race in this country. That probably makes sense with the data that I will show you today. The other aspect is the construction of gender. And it's basically is well known that the Western societies deliberately have devaluated women while benefit men. There's many studies that show that. And the last one is the social construction of race and gender have left these residues. And there's many people studying this that we see aspect of that, even though we're trying to be objectives in general, we have these biases that are conscious and unconscious. One of the other aspects that we need to consider when we talk about, in this case, network collaborations, is basically the society in general is designed for the majority. So if we have a majority of the societies on one aspect, probably the design or the rule of the society will be designed for that majority. And this is the idea about equality, when we think about we are all equal, but actually we are not, based on these previous biases. So even though we can promote equality, what we need actually, I would argue, is equity, right? With everyone, independent of if you are in the majority or the minority in society, have the same opportunities to persist, right? And be successful. And this is a really nice cartoon that I am using now that show this idea of the biases, and biases that for some people are invisible, and for others is day-to-day obstacles, right? You can see here the two people trying to see, they can go and run the same distance, but if you see all the obstacles that some of them will have versus the other ones, it's of course this is a problem with equity. So we started long ago in 2016. We published this paper. So some of you may be aware about this paper, but maybe not out. It's basically those legacies of race and sexisms in our society led for having a really limited representation of women in fisheries science. And these are data from the census of 2010. And we have there's kind of a equality in terms of gender. And the participation of biological sciences here is the proportion of PhD students in biological sciences that graduated in 2010. And this happened year to year to year. So they argue that many people have related to there is not a pool of applicants for position is not true if you see that, right? It's an accumulation of graduate person. You can think about the last 20 years being really consistent. Even now, there's more women graduating from biological sciences with PhDs than men. The database we collected is independent database for fisheries federal fisheries scientists. And this is a database independent of the academic database that we show after this. It's basically showing that the positions that hold by men are unbalanced related to their representation in the population. And I will ask you to keep in mind these 26% or 1/4 or close to 30%, I would say in some cases, of disparity. So there's 1 or 1/15 or 25% disparity in relationship with that. A different data set is related to the faculty that are working in all the US institutions or academic institutions that we investigated. And the independent database, again, from the federal scientists, but they show remarkable similarities related to the lack of diversity, and the proportion are kind of similar. If you see the last bar in the bottom, you see this is the full professorship. So this is kind of an idea for the historical perspective, 20 to 30 years ago, how much was before. So we're moving forward in this increased participation, but it still is really slow. So some kind of statistics here, like 70% of the tenure track are men. There is a consistent lack of diversity of women in this representation in fisheries science, and especially at the top levels. And I think I don't need to argue with anybody, but you can see about top positions in fisheries sciences are dominated by white men. Thinking about race also now is the same idea, right? It's the same. I will show the same series of before I move to the race, we have limitation. We were not able to consider other non-binary gender in this data set, so we are limited to women and men. The same story occurred for people of color. We have a representation, and about 48% of the people are non-white in the country. The participation in biological sciences now is a little bit behind. Almost 30% of them are non-white, receiving PhDs in 2010, same. And the gap between the representation in the population and actual federal job in this case is even bigger for the case of race. And you can see 9% of the people holding these positions are from BIPOC. The same, again, the independent academic data set, the same trend is like really low representation of people that from other races that are not white. So in this case, it's almost 90%. So the gap is bigger again in race. The lack of diversity is also consistent between academia and the federal government. So if you have this kind of the baseline, and we can start thinking about how collaboration networks may be affected by this lack of diversity. That was one of the questions that we had. I will try to answer now. But why collaboration network insights are important? So from the a little bit egotistic point of view, right? The lead authors, you're an academic, you know the lead author receive most of the recognition. If you are a first author in a paper, you will be basically, the person will be associated to the science in that paper. And usually it's the first author, and then the others have less importance. And we have a history of using this information related to the authorship to career advancement. So you have more publication as a first author, you can move forward in your career. You can have an easy promotion, and also we have more funding. So if you are competing with other people that have less publication as a first author, you have more advantages. So it's kind of thinking about equity and equality. Again, this is one of the things that play a role related to the academic network and career advancement in science. One thing is really important too in this case, similar to what's happened with the constructions and race and gender, is the social interactions between people are really foundational to building collaboration. And we usually often collaborate with people who we like to be with. And if you are working with people that looks like you can imagine how your collaboration network will be, or versus if you are looking for other aspects that probably you may be biased or not related to that. So, and we translate these ideas about collaboration network are really good indicators of successful in the career. And we can think about now the science behind fisheries in this case, but that could apply for any other science. Is the collaboration network will embody the dominant ideas of the science. So if we have a network of people, or only one representing only one type of race, for example, the dominant ideas will be from that type of science. In the 1970, I'm going to use this example as the American Fisheries Society as one of the oldest, or even the oldest society in fisheries in the world. In the first issue of Transaction, which is the main journal that was used to all the management or the historical management on populations and aquaculture in North America and even in other parts of the world, is the Transactions. So if we understand the pattern of authorship in these old journals, we can understand what is going to happen with the people behind the science. And just taking a quick look to that, we found that the first article led by a woman in this journal occurred 47 years after the journal. So think about now, if you create a journal, and it probably will be impossible at this time, but think about you create a journal now, 50 years after that will be the first woman first author. It's kind of a really interesting in the term of perspective. So if we look the time series of authorship in Transaction, we can have an idea about how the collaboration network, the first authorship based on gender will play a role. So we did that, basically went to the journal and looked for names and assign names to gender. I can explain you later the details, but the main idea is that we have this historical journal that provides a really long story of science in fisheries. And in the bars, you see in the gray shade, you see the numbers of articles published in Transaction every single year. And in orange, you can see those authors led by a woman, and in blue, the lead author led by a man. And you can see that there is an increase in the proportion of papers led by a woman since the 80s. So not really long ago. If you try to do kind of projections based on these trends, we are expecting equality in terms of first authorship in papers by 2059. So 30 years from now, or 40 years from now. So you can imagine that this is nothing that we would like to do. This is a whole career of people, one or two generations probably. Then we expand this idea to, well, what's happened with other journals? Where Transaction is one of the oldest ones, but how about those most common journals that people publish in fisheries? So we expand this search for all these journals are being defined as a really common journal that reflect the science in fisheries. And there is some journals related to diseases, aquaculture, reviews, and fisheries in the ocean and also in freshwater systems. And so we revised more than 34,000 articles. And again, we use the same gender assignation of gender based on first name. And we have data with more limited time because were not available those first name before 2006. It's a snapshot, but it still is a good time series. And you can see the proportion of gender by journal here. So if you put all these, you have journals that are really bad for women. If you want to publish this in North American Journal of Fisheries Management, it's really low, and Fisheries is also really low, and all the journals from the American Fisheries Society actually is lower than we wish they would. However, if you do an average here, we know that the 29% of the published papers was led by women. So these 20%, 26% are when showing now this is 29%. So it's close about the representation of women in fisheries. So the argument about if you are a woman, you publish less than if you are a man, that is kind of a going around in like non-formally, right? Of course, it's not true. And this is the data that show that the women-led authors are publishing at the same pace. It's just representing the proportion they are in the workforce. So we trying to see, well, it's not just about the first authorship, but about the impact of the science. And one of the things that the impact of the science can be measurable is the number of citations, right? So we went back and revised all these journals and look for you can see in the x-axis, the number of times cited, and then the y-axis is the proportion. And then take a look, this is a log scale. So if you see differences in between the two lines, this difference is minimized because of the scale, right? But it's significant. So it's showing that in general, women-led articles have less citation relative to men. So even though women can publish at the same proportion of their representation in the workforce, they are cited less than men. And again, you make the connection now with the construction of race and gender, and you can make sense with this data. This is something similar, and the previous one is showing all the journals together, and this is the proportion of article with women-led versus the proportion of citation of article with women-led. So if we have equality related to citations, all the journals should be in the one-on-one line, in the perpendicular line you can see in black. But you see most of the journals are in the lower quadrant of the graph, meaning that there is a less proportion of articles cited when the lead author is a woman. These are articles from international journals, so this is not just the US issue, this is a worldwide issue because these journals are international. And we went back and looked for those academic networks that are really revealing of the collaboration, pattern of collaboration, because you can track people. That is really hard to track people where they are not in academia because they switch jobs and so on. So we use the same idea of authorship information through Web of Science, and we can track those people that hold position in fisheries academic universities, and we can track their pattern of collaboration. How we can do that? We use the idea of networks. And here's one figure that shows basically a type of network. In this case is from the Return of the Jedi. And it's showing that the links between nodes and links, right? So the thick of the link in this case is the number of times these two people, in this case, Luke and Han Solo, interact. So thicker line means they have more interaction than thinner lines. And you can see Obi-Wan, for example, could be really charismatic, but is really isolated from the full networks. So if we understand the structure of these networks, and you can think about the publication network or the co-authorship network, we can understand how is these patterns based on race or based on gender. So we did that, and basically just to make sure that everyone can be in the same page, we are going to build this co-publication network that can reveal this pattern of collaborations. So in this case, the nodes will be an author A and author B, and the line between them will be a publication. So you see author with more publication, we have thicker lines, and the author with less publication, we have a thinner line. So then we can create this idea of like examining this ego network, which is basically you put in the center of your network, and in the case you have different patterns of collaboration in this case. And you have, for example, in the left top, the star is showing that there is one centerpiece that is collaborating with a different person, but none of them collaborate between each other, right? The other, for example, the type of line is you collaborate with other people, and the other people collaborate with the next one, and so on, and so on. You can make these metrics and trying to interpret how they these patterns are at whole. There's one type of metric that we can extract from network analysis, which is the degree. It's basically it's the really simple metric. It's the number of edges or lines connected to a node, how many collaboration each scientist has. That will be reflected by the dynamic co-authorship. The good thing about this is we can recreate this network in the past, right? Because we can go back for those positions that hold really senior position at the present, like full professor, and go to their networks from the beginning when we have data from the Web of Science. So we did that, and we created this US academic co-authorship network in fisheries, and we will call them FishNet, right? So in here I have a short animation that show the time, and in the bottom you have the time. You have from the 72, that the first one we were able to detect, and we moved to up to 2016. And you will see two nodes here, and the first node is basically these two people are publishing a paper in 2072, and I will have this network started to grow, adding more people, more PhD students, friends of the others, and then I can, in the old time, basically you recommended this person for the position in the other university, and so on. And you can see a woman now appearing to the network and collaborated with someone else. They are isolated, but they're moving there. So some networks are started moving and creating this pattern of collaboration over time. What we see in the collaboration network is basically the network is getting more basically, is growing in size, but also are more linked together, which is basically indication of the science, or the problem of the science that we have now are more complex. So we need more knowledge from more people from different fields. So the network is expanding, adding people from other fields that before were not needed, probably based on the views of that time. So the network has shifted over time, and now is larger and more connected. We can see this with this figure that has a lot of axes, but I will try to go through. Again, this is the year of the publication. Again, we have from 75, because this is just the academic network. So it's not the other articles that we created before, but it's the similar pattern. And you can have the number of articles here, and you can see the dotted line are increasing. So this network is publishing at this pace. The US academic network is publishing about 1,000 papers every year. The proportion of single authorship in general, you can see is going to be, is really rare. It's going to be extinct at some point, right? And you can see it was really, really foundational to have solo author papers and really prestigious. But I think now the idea of having a solo paper is kind of impossible to manage because of the complexity of the issues, right? You need to know a lot about different fields. So that the case of the single authorship is the opposite of what we see related to the numbers of authors per article, which is about now between 5. So in general, there is 5 authors per journal. You can track your own record to check that. So at the same time, we see a little bit of improvement in relationship with the participation of women or BIPOC in this journal, in this network. So in the y-axis, you can see the number of authors per article from the network, right? So and the network is moving over time. So the participation of the incorporation of women and other people from different races are increasing in this network. They are embedded in that. And again, you see the percentage here is about 20 something, it's 25, 20, 23 somehow. So it's moving at the pace of the representation, which really is really interesting. The number of authors of white race or men are always there. So this is not changing in general. So now if we can follow individual careers, taking advantage of the idea of having this time series, we can track individual people over time. And this is the kind of each of these lines is representing one person of the academic network. So you see, and the degree, remember, is the number of publication or co-authorship that they are increasing over time, which is makes sense. But still, we see some disparities here. The circles, dark blue and dark orange, as well as dark gray and dark purple, are the mean of the whole network for that category. So you can see disparities related to the number of the degree metric for men is higher than the degree metric for women. So people with high degree, especially most recently, are even increasing exponentially and moving away from the others. So yet, men and white hold most influential position in this fishnet. And again, we can track back with the idea of like the general ideas in fisheries. So the science behind fisheries is dominated by, of course, the dominant class. So women and people of color have not yet reached these top influential positions. We're in the process. And the last detail figure that I would like to show is related to these ego networks. So we decided to look at those top influencing positions for women and for men and see what particular type of network they have, how we can mimic those patterns of collaboration that seems to be successful, or how we can understand those patterns. So here are the top 5 men in the networks. You can see the number of publication is the size of the symbol, and the number of co-publication is this thick line that will connect these two symbols. So we will have top 5 men from this academic network in fisheries represented in this figure. So each of these MD1, MD2, MD3, MD4, and MD5 are in the center of the network, and then you can search and you can see how these collaboration networks are. The pattern of collaboration is kind of interesting. This one, for example, the MD1 is highly associated to others MD, basically other top 5. This one also is associated to other top 5, but these other top 5 and the women here are isolated somehow, right? And this one also the same idea. Women are isolated. They still collaborate with this person, but they seem to be more, in some cases, more isolated than others. This other MD4 has a lot of collaboration with other people, with a couple of authors, basically. And this one also has no woman in their network. So we can learn about that. And now, how about the 5 top of type women, top 5 women collaborations? And we found these are relatively simpler. Again, the WD1, WD2, so on, they are in the network. And then you can see the pattern of collaboration. All women, but this one had other women in their network. Those networks are simpler, and you can see that. And just in this case, this woman is able to collaborate with other top 5 men. And this is the more complex, I would argue, network compared with the others. So for us, the patterns of collaboration is telling us about many things that's going on at the societal level, right? The idea of isolation, the idea of not feeling included, the idea of having more difficulties. If you remember the race, I think this is the reflection of that we see in collaborations. And again, the history of our societies also can reflect and can be part of this, the history of North America, right, that I mentioned in the first slide. Again, in 1870, the AFS was funded. The first woman president was after 67 years of the society. And after 153 years, next year, we will have the first Black president of AFS, which is a woman. So changes have been really slow, but I think we can do better. In our own state, our own backyard, we see the increasing participation in historically white state. And this is in the Wildlife Society and the American Fisheries Society chapters. And there's no woman in this photo in the 60s. And now we in the 2016, there is 30% of the people in the photo are women. So we're moving forward in the right direction. It's just probably is not the velocity that we wish to do it, especially in this century. The demography of the organization is also changed. This is in 1930, where Dr. Emmeline Moore is there in the circle, and then there's only other 3 women that probably they are wives of some people there. And in 2016, we see this increasing in more colorful society. So as a final reflections, and I would like to have time to discussion reflections. And again, I think there is room for everyone in the table to provide explanation of it. This is, again, these are interpretation based on what we know. But in general, we know that this scientific collaboration, and many people in the room probably may feel represented, that this could be a barrier for development of scientific communities if you are not invited, right? The gender gap seems to be an impact gap. It's not a productivity gap. And this, I think, is kind of clear. And the problem is not just because we would like to be fair with each other. It's basically we left out science with other ideas. We are going to keep using the same ideas, and we are not having the idea of having more innovation in this complex problem that we have in fisheries and other areas of the sciences. The change has not been spontaneous. And I think one of the pushing is not just that going with the wave. But I think we need to intervene, and we need to do more active to make these changes. The last slide I have for today is it's something about how it's going to be this network that are more inclusive, and there are many challenges of that. And we know that diverse network will be smarter and it will be more innovative. We have some challenges though that we need to consider. So I think the people in power would like to do some practices that are more inclusive, especially in conversation in tables, in labs, in meetings, so everyone feel they can be heard. Sometimes we have the tendency to have homogeneous teams because we feel easier, because we know the other person for many years, so I will keep working with that person because it's nice. And there is many monologues or ideas that are really dominant that take all the time, so there's no room for others. I think we need to change that. The other one is we need to practice social sensitivity, especially for diverse team of people that feel less comfortable. So we need to create this environment that will be more inclusive for everyone, So I have a question for everyone here, and with that finishes. What would you like to our fisheries workforce looks like in the near future? I think everyone has a play role to do, and I invite you to be active and make the changes. And thank you very much. And hopefully we have time for discussion and questions.
Yes, and I wanted to start with just some clarifying questions that came in. We'll work through these, everyone, and then I will be able to unmute those that raise their hand, and we can kind of go into a discussion. But going back to the slide that had the blue graph and the orange graph, with the men publishing and the women publishing, the question we got was, do you know what happened in the 1920s and the 1940s, and why there was a little spike in the women publications?
Yes. This is really interesting. We call it the Emmeline Moore effect, because Emmeline Moore came to the society and she was really a person that published a lot. And so that's because of her.
Okay, thank you for that. And then another question was, and maybe this is kind of overall for other things, is can you go into a little bit more depth about how you determine gender and race for authors? Sure. I think that'll help us understand a little bit more.
So there is many ways to do that, right? One is looking for, well, of course, there is a subjectivity there. Again, we are in this binary world that it's the best that we can do, at least without disclosing the gender from people, which will take a lot of time probably and trust. First is we use for the fishery workforce, we use face picture of people to assign gender. and then we can track that. For the other journals, we use a different method, which is based on first names. And there is many databases that do that and have at the world level. There is a database that can hold like millions and millions of names and provide the probability of based on the year that they can be male or female, and they create this probability. And the third one is we were able to merge these last two with the American Fisheries Society composition. There is thousands of people with names from over the world. So we use those probabilities from the big database and validate with the American Fisheries Society where the people disclose their gender. And we found like 98% of agreement on those two. So of course there is some couple of percentage that we may be confusing, but could be either way, but it still is really good representation of gender, I think. And other people have done this before with even more number of publications. I hope that answered.
Yeah, and if that didn't quite get to the question, go ahead and put in another question or raise your hand and I can unmute you and you can ask that question verbally. We had another question about, did you look at authorships and how that varied with the impact factor of the specific journal?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. I mean, this is kind of a work in process. Again, we're trying to expand this to other fields, not just fisheries. But in the case of fisheries, we besides one of them, which is fish and fisheries, we don't have many other journals that are really high in impact, but they are really important for the science in fisheries, right? So we decided not to do the game of impact factor because we have only 25 journals. So it's going to be fragment a little bit too much. I think we can do that for when we expand these to other fields like ecology, range sciences, and stuff like that. So we're working on that paper now, trying to expand these to other fields that to show, to see that there is a relationship with that. But I'm sure there is.
Okay, and then were you able to explore at all intersectionality in this individual study?
Yeah, that was one of the questions from the reviewer from one of the papers, and it's unfortunately we have low sample sizes, right? So you thinking about Black scientists in fisheries in academic positions, there are really few, and probably you can count them with your hands. And then you divide them by gender will be even worse. So we don't want to individualize people. We were trying to keep the anonymity of people. So we didn't push much more on the intersectionality, but for sure it will be even more difficult for Black women to be included in this collaboration than for white women, for example.
Okay. And I think that this would be a good time for us to just kind of open it up. So if folks have more general questions, or if they have other clarifying questions, this would be a good time. But one of these broader questions that we have, I'm sorry, I'm just getting a little background noise and I was just checking to see. Allison, it seems that your mic has become unmuted and I didn't know if you knew that was happening. There it is. Okay. So one of the questions that came in was, what do you think can be done to change some of this at a faster clip than that eventual merging of the two lines? What can we do?
True. I think we need to push in both sides, from top down and from bottom up. I mean, I think from a student, we have a lot of push from a student to change this. And I really like that. And also we need to make our leadership conscious about these issues. So they need to push from their side, but also we can push in our own backyard. So how we behave, how you invite people from a different background or different race or gender in our own research, our lab, who are going to cite you or who are you going to cite? Are you aware about these issues? Other thing that you can do is like, who are you, if you are having a lab, for example, what is the composition of your lab members? Are you just selecting based on offering, or you are targeting underrepresented group that can also be listed to have more equality related to that? So I think there is a lot of things we can do. First, start with your own background or your own group or your own network, and then push for on both sides, right? From the bottom and from the top. and especially with people that has the ears from the top administrators and in all levels.
And this kind of jumps on something that you just said. Do you know what the drivers are on why women are receiving fewer citations than men?
Well, this is again, this is a speculation, but probably a educated speculation. It's related to the society that diminish women in general, like a Western society, and that basically is kind of a part of the unconscious biases that we have, we all have somehow.
Interesting. Another question or comment here is, do you have thoughts or advice on how we can encourage promotion and retention of a more diverse candidates in our workforce? What are your thoughts about promotion and retention?
I think what we need to do a better job is like trying to understand why people left and where people are living, and trying to bring those issues back and say, hey, how we can counter those. If we see commonalities of these reasons, means that maybe, well, could be a problem of the place, not the workforce, not the immediate colleagues probably, but how about the city? How about the composition of the how you feel in your community, right? So there's many dimensions that probably are affecting those decisions. Especially, I heard some Black student from Newport that they couldn't find a place that way they can do their hair, because they have a really special need for that, and there is no place in Newport for that. So things about that are really small, right? But if you have accumulation of that, and I'm not saying that you need to create a place for that, but these things are kind of the little things that make the difference, especially, and those are things that we can work as a community, right? And trying to be more welcoming for everyone.
Yeah, I know that we in the subgroup that Allison was talking about at Hatfield really started thinking about, it's more than just recruitment, because retention, especially in a small rural area like Newport is, like you mentioned, not only is it about getting everybody here, it is about making sure they feel comfortable to stay.
Yes.
And then how you present yourself for a community that is maybe not as accepting of diversity. That's a challenge for folks to come and be in an environment where they don't feel welcome. So what can we do to keep them here when we are trying to figure out, is it the workforce, or is it about the community that particular individual lives in? So thoughts about, it seems like we have a little more control over the workforce, perhaps, if we address those issues, but community impacts for the individuals we want to bring to Hatfield, for example?
Yeah. Well, I think that's a difficult question, right? It probably would be depending on leadership of communities, and I would say that, well, if as institution, as OSU is a institution that is meant to serve all people, we should create more opportunities for the community to be aware of that, right? So we can create a gastronomic festival or a music festival that bring people from different backgrounds, that they are welcome, so that people learn, experience, and finally accept and embrace differences. So I think this is a little bit more that we can do as an institution, like opening to the community, because it's going to be benefit for everyone, not just for the people, but for the people that is in the institution. So
nice. Wanted to ask you just kind of, what is your next step? You've kind of alluded a little bit that you're hoping to expand beyond fisheries. Can you talk to us a little bit about what your team is working on now?
I'm thinking that we are going to try to expand this for other fields related to natural resources. We're in the process of that, but it's going to be a little bit slowed down, because this work, to be honest, is a lot of emotional and related to emotional stress and emotional, supporting, and I think sometimes people need a break and then get back some energy and get back. So I think I am in that process now, and I'm trying to wrap it up and trying to see what else we can do to help. And yeah, but I don't have a kind of a defined pattern that I have with my other signs, right? That I'm going to go this way. And in this one, it's more like what is needed and what I would like to do and now in the next step. So yeah, well, there's a couple of students in my lab, they are working in something related to safety issues or concerns related to women in the field. So we are trying to think about that, how we can help this to be aware about these issues and how you can take a next step on that. So this is something that came from my lab that I would like to support too. So that is not yet defined, but we're probably reach some people and at some point related to do some kind of a survey that we like to do at not just Oregon, but maybe a national level.
I think there'd be many groups at Hatfield that would be very interested in that, both about, you know, what folks are experiencing, but also ways that we can make that feel a little bit better for folks.
Exactly.
Wanted to just make sure there wasn't another question, but what we're getting are thank yous and congratulations and hand claps coming in a little bit. So thank you so much for spending time with us. And yes, take care of yourself. This work is very emotionally draining and we appreciate you doing what you do and presenting this information and putting it forward. It'll be interesting as you move forward to see whether fisheries is different. I'm gonna make a guess that it's probably not as different as we would expect potentially. So yeah, I bet those patterns are going to carry through in a couple different places. So
yeah, thank you very much for the invitation and for the people that listen.
Absolutely. One final question for you. If you are comfortable, would you put your contact information into the chat if you can see it? So if folks have follow-up questions, either about the details of the questions or details of the study, please reach out to Vaughn directly. Or if you want to engage in other conversations, please feel free. There it is right there. I'll give everyone a few minutes to grab that if you would like. Thank you for sharing that. I appreciate that.
Sure.
Yeah, so follow up directly with Yvonne and then you can get that information. For everybody online, thank you so much for being a part of this conversation. I hope it was a good thought process to think about what we can do to move things forward. I think Yvonne definitely highlighted the fact that we have some work to do. And we know that, but there's the data that shows it. It's right there. So yeah, think about that. I don't know if you see the chat still, but yeah, everybody's saying thank you so much and thanks for spending the time. And so you are appreciated and your work is valued. So I just want to say that out loud. All right, everybody. Thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it. And thank you, Fawn, for being here with us. We appreciate your time. Until next time, everybody, we'll see you next week. Bye now.
Bye-bye.